Has there ever been a time where your gut instincts kicked in because of someone else? Tonight's stories aren't about haunted houses or ancient curses. They're about moments when something quietly whispers to you, you need to leave now. And the truly terrifying part is sometimes that little instinct, that whisper, is the only thing that keeps you safe. So lock the doors, keep your phone nearby, and always trust your gut. Let's go. This is Static Hour, a late-night broadcast of strange and unsettling stories from the darkest corners of the internet. I'm Bree, and we are officially on the air. Tonight's trigger warnings that I would give are talks about stalking and attempted abduction, just as usual, scary things. So our first story, the user is Flashy Sprinkles 218. The subreddit is Creepy Encounters, and the post is called, "Did my sweet tooth save my life?" I still don't know if I narrowly avoided something really bad, or if this guy was just deeply unstable, but it has stayed with me for years. A stranger walked past me while I was at work one day, stopped, and asked me out on a date. I'd never seen him before. It caught me off guard, but he came across as confident and kind of old school, so I said yes. I'm raising my hand right now. Hi. Don't ever say yes to a stranger that asks you out while they're walking past you. What? That's insane. And it keeps getting more insane. I'm not victim blaming or anything. I just, maybe this is a hot take here. I don't know. I haven't been single for a very long time, but I don't think that you should immediately go on a date with someone just because they asked you if you have never had a full conversation with them before. Just throwing that out there. So sorry if I have offended anyone. All right. So they said yes to this date. He asked if he could pick me up for a coffee date, and I agreed. You guys, we already know, don't ever let anyone pick you up from your house. Now the guy knows where you live. Okay, I'm sorry. When he picked me up, he already had a McDonald's coffee for me. It was from right near my house. I took a sip and immediately realized I didn't like it because there was no sugar in it. I have a huge sweet tooth and I always have a ton of sugar in my coffee. That tiny moment is what changed the entire night for me. Because I didn't like the coffee, I stopped properly drinking it and just pretending to sip it so I wouldn't seem rude. But from that point, my brain also started to question everything. Good job. Why would he already buy me a random coffee when the whole point of the date was supposedly to go get coffee together? He didn't even know how I took it. Then things started to feel off. He drove straight past where we were meant to go. When I asked, he casually changed the destination to somewhere further away. During the drive, I also caught him in small lies. He said he worked at my local Woolworths, but I told him that couldn't be true because I'm there all the time and would have recognized him. He didn't really respond. He then started repeatedly asking if I'd finished my drink. Not once or twice. About 10 times. By the time we turned off the main road toward the new location, it was fully dark. At one point, he turned down a road heading toward bushland. I stopped questioning him at that point because something in me felt like I needed to stay calm and not escalate anything. That is so smart. There was also something large and metal in the glove box that kept moving and banging around, and he kept drawing attention to it. After that, his behavior changed completely. He started driving erratically, swerving from one side of the road to the other while using his elbows on the wheel. He started yelling that he was Kanye West and I was Kim Kardashian. Then he drove down a dirt road and then off the dirt road into the bush. We were driving through trees in the dark. Eventually, he stopped the car right at the edge of a lake. The water was basically at the front of the car. Then he just sat there in silence for about 15 minutes. I'm sorry, can you imagine just sitting next to a person who has driven you out into the middle of nowhere and then he is just completely silent for 15 minutes? I feel like after 2 minutes, I would be going crazy. I don't know how I would be able to sit there for 15 minutes. It's so spooky. It felt like he was waiting for something. When he eventually got out of the car, it was pitch black outside. I couldn't see where he went or what he was doing. My heart was absolutely pounding. The second he got out, I grabbed my phone and texted my friend, telling her to call me and say we had training and to not ask questions. I also made sure to casually describe where I was in a way that made sense. When he came back and got in the car, my phone rang. My friend followed exactly what I asked. After the call, he just looked at me and said, "So you have to go?" I said yes. He sat there in silence for another few minutes before finally turning the car back on and driving me home without saying a single word. I never saw him again. To this day, I still wonder if not liking that coffee is what saved me. If he had added sugar and I'd actually finished the drink, would my life have changed completely? Oh, you guys, starting off with a banger tonight. I really, really hate that. And I'm so, so glad that this user stayed safe and did listen to their instincts, because I can't imagine a situation like that seems like it is so, so fragile that no matter if you just do one little thing, you're going to set him off or something. You just have no idea. So I'm really, really glad that it worked out in the user's favor instead of him. And I'm so curious to see, it would be so interesting to know if he ever kind of went on and did something to someone else, or, how many times he'd already done this. Hopefully never, but I feel like this was not a first time kind of thing. Or if it was his first time, I feel like after that moment, he kind of regrouped and could have been okay, well, obviously I need to do this next time. It's just so, so wild. I hate it. All right, story number 2. The user is Peter Puck, and this is from the subreddit True Scary Stories. The title is called The Marketplace Deal That Almost Trapped Me. I was browsing Marketplace when I came across an ad for an SUV, a Saturn Vue, in quote-unquote great condition. But here's the kicker. It was priced about 50% below market value. I thought, this has to be a scam. But curiosity got the better of me. The ad had a phone number, so I called it. A young guy picked up, sounding friendly enough, and went on about how the vehicle was in perfect shape. When I asked why he was selling it, he mumbled something about wanting something sportier. Yeah, right, I thought. But I was intrigued enough and agreed to go check it out. That's when things got weird. He insisted I bring cash. A dark feeling crept over me, a warning sign. But I brushed it off. Hate to see it. But again, how many times do we brush off those little tickles in the back of your head when you're oh, should I really do it? Because especially as I know for me, I don't know if this person is a male or female or what, but I know for me as a woman, it's easy for me to think of every possible situation and scenario that could possibly happen at any point in my life. And so when I encounter a situation that may actually not be a good situation, I'm always oh, whatever, I'm just overreacting, as we tend to do, women. But no, I don't think this person is overreacting this time. As I drove to the address he'd given me, that uneasy feeling had turned into full-blown dread. I was literally seconds away from pulling up to the house when I called him again to confirm. His first question, "Do you have the cash?" Why would I come if I didn't have the cash? Sorry, that was me saying, why would you come? Like, my gut twisted. I answered, yes, but something told me not to park the car in front of the house. Instead, I parked a block up the street and decided to wait. I sat there for a few minutes looking around. There was no Saturn view in sight. No sign of any vehicle for sale. The street was eerily quiet, almost too still. Then, out of nowhere, a white Audi station wagon slowed down in front of the house. Inside, I saw a group of young men, all of them scanning the area. They looked tense, on edge, as if they were searching for someone or something. They didn't spot me, tucked away further up the street. I watched as they slowly crept past the house, their eyes darting around, until they finally drove past me. They didn't suspect I was sitting there with a fat envelope of cash. I could feel my heart pounding as I watched them drive away. It all felt wrong, very wrong. My gut had been screaming at me from the start, but now I knew this was not about a car. This was about setting someone up for something much worse. I drove home, feeling both ashamed that I let it get this far and grateful that nothing had happened yet. Later, I contacted the police. I gave them the ad number, the phone number, and told them exactly what had happened. I insisted that they do something before someone got hurt. Days passed, and to my knowledge, they did nothing. Then the news broke. Story after story surfaced of people being lured by ads just like the one I got. Told to bring cash, only to be threatened with guns or knives and robbed of their money. No descriptions of the perpetrators were ever given, just vague warnings telling people to be careful. Every now and then I wonder what might have happened if I pulled up to that house. What if I ignored my gut completely and walked right into whatever they had planned? All I know is sometimes a great deal isn't worth the risk. Trust your gut. Again, I am so glad that they trusted their gut. And like I said, that's kind of our theme for tonight, is just trusting your gut. I feel like stories like that are so common. I highly doubt any of them really get solved like that, because it's just something that you would have to report, way after the fact, or you can't describe the perpetrator or whatever. That's not your fault. But I just feel like it's one of those things that really falls through the cracks, unfortunately. All right, our next story. This one's a long one. And this one is so spooky. Just a side note, I did try to record this entire episode a couple weeks ago and it recorded without sound. So I have read these stories and this one is just I'm getting anxious just thinking about it again. So I'm very excited to read this one. The truck stop story is really not kid friendly because I know that my kids really like to listen to our spooky stories, but this one will not be one that they will listen to. So I just want to give that warning. It is by a user that deleted their account, so I don't know who it was originally from. And the subreddit is True Scary Stories. And this post was 4 or 5 years old now. It's called Truck Stop Horror. This is a real life 100% true story that happened to me. In 2003, I had met a guy that said he would take me on adventures and make my life exciting. Little did I know that the safe world I had grown up in was about to get shattered. I lived in a small town and had never really traveled outside my state, never experienced life in a way that others would. We were kind of sheltered from the big crime and other things that had been happening over the countryside. So my now ex decided to take me on a journey of being an over-the-road truck driver. In a lot of cases, this was a great experience. There were a lot of fun times, and I got to see most of the United States. But trucking life is hard, and being on the road 24/7 is not easy. Being cooped up in a small truck with someone for that long would cause anyone to go mad. Life on the road is much different now than when it was when I was trucking. People now have advancement in technology and the ability to binge watch your favorite YouTube channel, surf the web, or play games on your phone to keep yourself occupied. The only forms of entertainment we had was either watching one of the dozen or so DVDs, reading yet another book, or talking on the radio. We often opted for talking on the radio, and this became our version of social media, long before Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter were even a thought. Just like we do now, we created a different identity or persona to hide behind while interacting with people who are basically strangers. And trust me, truckers can be creepy. And keeping a bit of anonymity was the only way to stay safe on the road. When you're a trucker, you require a CB handle. My ex's was Ninja Dwarf, and they changed this for his safety. And mine, since I was a, quote, baby, barely 20 years old, and I'm from Alaska, so mine ended up being Northern Exposure. Again, changed for safety reasons. During the time on the road, you meet a lot of crazy people, and you see a ton of crazy stuff. And I do mean a ton. People often hear about stories of things that happen on the road. Most of them are more gross than scary. You know, like drivers getting a little too friendly with their cabin buddies. But this time was one of the most terrifying experiences I'd ever had in my life. And when it comes to strange and unusual events, my life is full of them. Have you ever gotten the heebie-jeebies from someone's voice? Like, flat out scared to talk to someone? A voice that makes you think that the person on the other line is not all there? That was this guy. Something about him just made my skin crawl, and I had only ever heard his voice through the crackle of the CB radio. The CB started to crackle, and when we heard the distant call, you could barely hear a voice through the static, but eventually he got close enough that we could hear him clearly. He must have been 50 miles or so behind us because it was still faint, but our radio was peaked and tweaked and could really reach out and touch someone. We could just hear him through the chatter of the CB. And then I heard it. That voice. It's hard to explain, but the best way I can now describe it would be like Heath Ledger talks as Joker in the Batman movie. There was just something off about it, and it gave me the chills. He simply said, "Hey there, Purple Pete," the color of our truck. "Where are you headed?" Okay, I'm so sorry you guys are my voice, but it is a little bit of a dialogue, so I'm going to do my best. My ex hollered back we were headed to Arkansas. The driver said he was going the same way and asked if he could tag along with us and introduce himself as Maniac. We would run from one coast to the other and back again. The guy always seemed to be running the same route as us, but we had never physically seen his truck. He described it as a 378 long-nosed Peterbilt that was black and had a brow and a cattle guard. According to him, he ran dry box from California to Florida, which explained why he always seemed to be either coming or going off the I-10. One week, when we were running from Florida back to LA, we caught up to him on his back trip from Redmond, Washington to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He told us he would meet up with us in Nevada when we did our trip back because by that time, we would have run out of hours and needed to take a rest. We said sure, even though I totally did not want to meet this guy. My ex had become friends with him, so we gave him an ETA on when we would be back in the area and what truck stop we would be at, and told him that we would meet up with him for a meal. This was really before the idea of having a cell phone for anything other than emergencies, so it wasn't like we could just call him and tell him when we were going to be in the area. They really had to plan it. He agreed, and we parted ways. My ex continued talking to him until the radios would no longer reach. We'd finished our load and were heading back to Las Vegas to the truck stop we agreed on and waited. Las Vegas is a shady place for truckers in general. Lots of crime, lots of bad stuff happens. So we waited in the truck. Finally, we got bored and ventured into the truck stop for a bit. We waited and eventually killed enough time where we could actually take another load, so we headed out, never actually meeting up with him in Nevada. But a few months later, we ran into him in Oklahoma. We heard some chatter on the radio about these lot lizards getting brutally murdered at truck stops in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Tennessee, but chalked it up to drama on the radio. After all, we had quite literally nothing better to do than make up, quote-unquote, truck driver stories. We kept hearing about it and even brought it up to Maniac, and he just laughed and said it must be one real sick guy doing it. Must be just a story, because if it were true, they would have caught him already. I bet he even left fingerprints or something at the crime scene. With as bloody and messy as it would be, I bet he wants to get caught. Seemed like a weird thing to say, but he was a very weird guy, so that was totally in character for him. Maniac went his way, and we went ours, and after a while, I forgot about the weird comment. Fast forward to a few weeks later, we were in Mississippi, and we hear a familiar voice on the radio. It was Maniac. We had taken a long weekend because it was Labor Day, and most companies were okay with drivers taking an extra day off. Our plan was to make it to this lake out in the middle of nowhere. We were going to drop off our trailer and head out bobtail, which I don't know if they explain this later on or not, but bobtail, if I'm correct, is where you just set the trailer down and you're just driving like the cab of the truck. So we chatted, and he said he was heading to Tennessee and that he would be heading out in the next morning. And so, cutting our much-needed break short and bypassing the weekend at the lake, my ex decided to run with him so that there was someone to talk to. We had gotten into an argument earlier, and I wasn't talking to him, and he absolutely hated the silent treatment. Our load was to deliver in North Carolina in a few days, so being a few hours ahead of the deadline just meant that we would be at the top of the line to pick up our load back. Win-win. We left that morning and headed out. The guys decided we would stop in Tennessee and finally, after about 6 months of chatting, meet each other. We weren't afraid to meet up with him, but I was still very on edge. Now, I was no slouch. I grew up with 15 boys in the house, and I was a known fighter. My ex was a big dude, standing at 6'3", about 280 pounds. So, in theory, we could take him if we needed to. The only way he could get the best of us was if he had a weapon, which back then was highly illegal to have in the trucks. And if you were caught by DOT, it was jail time, no questions asked. With our company, we had very specific fuel stations we could use to top off. Maniac was an owner-operator, so he could go anywhere. Maniac said he'd already stopped to get fuel and took a shower, but he would drop his trailer and meet us at a Flying J, which is a gas station and like a pretty big truck stop that was down the road from where he was, which I believe was a Love's fuel station. So we get ready to fuel up, we showered, and got a booth at the restaurant. We waited about 45 minutes before ordering food, and waited, and waited. No one ever showed up, and there was no way to contact him. My ex was not a patient man, so we ate and then headed back to our truck. I remember it being really dark and humid. It was probably 10 p.m. or so. There wasn't much for noise in this truck stop, which was unnerving. A quiet truck stop is a creepy truck stop. We walked across the fuel island to be greeted by a ton of flashing lights. It's not uncommon for either lizards to get busted or drivers to get involved in stuff they're not supposed to, so we really didn't think much of it. Cops and a truck stop go hand in hand. But this was more than just your typical truck stop shenanigans. We passed 12 or so trucks. This was one of the bigger Flying J's, so it probably could fit about 80 trucks and trailers if you went all the way back to the dirt. And then you could Tetris a dozen or so trucks in the dirt lot, which happened to be where our truck was. So basically what she's saying is like their truck is way out, so they had to walk pretty far out to get back to their truck. Now, I'm a curvy girl, not fat, but I don't look like I belong in a truck stop. I was used to drivers looking at me all creepy like. I always got taunted and harassed, even though I was a driver. In fact, there are a lot of truck stops that are not safe to walk in alone. I was walking with my ex, and we weren't holding hands or anything, but it was very obvious that I was with him. We walked down the row and saw a bobtail truck parked in a full parking spot. I thought it was weird because he was in a truck space with no trailer. Typically, bobtail trucks will park at the end of a run and leave the big spaces for trucks with trailers because that was, again, another unspoken trucker rule. We moved by the bobtail truck. It was dark, maybe like a dark black or blue with a cattle guard and a brow. I don't remember seeing what type of truck it was, just that it was kind of menacing in the dark. Old school trucker code was that if you were looking for company, the driver would park and leave his reading red light on to tell people that the driver was interested in entertainment. The guy was sitting in the passenger seat. He had the red reading light on so I could see his face. It was a little distorted, but he gave me the creepiest smile and then quickly shut his blinds. We were about 6 trucks down from the bobtail. I could see his truck from ours, and I remember looking back and seeing the red light still illuminating the porthole window and the passenger door. And a small slit down the curtain showed a dark spot. He was still watching us. Even with as warm as it was, chills shot up my spine, and I got a very uneasy feeling. My gut wrenched with a sudden feeling of dread. We finally got back to the truck and turned on the CB for our night entertainment and to see if we could radio Maniac and see what the deal was. The chatter was all about the cops and the ambulance and the fire truck and the DOT. All the commotion was basically across from us but 2 rows up. People were saying that there was a dead lot lizard and that it was really bad, like gnarly. One driver started trying to explain, but then he was told that he had to keep his mouth shut by a police officer. Being the nosy people that we are, my ex and I jumped out of the truck to go investigate. We dodged in and out of the trucks and managed to wiggle our way up to the scene. You know when you hear the phrase, "Some things cannot be unseen"? This was one of them. The lady, or what was left of her, okay. Before I say this, this would be a big trigger warning for people if you do not like graphic descriptions of things. All right, I'm going to continue the story. The lady, what was left of her, had been tied to the trailer in the truck. Then someone pulled the kingpin, that piece that locks the 2 of them together, and let down the landing gear. The driver, who is now sitting in the back of a police car, cuffed, his head hung limp with his forehead on the back of the seat. He was crying big, heavy sobs, and there was vomit on his shirt. We could hear them through the closed door, wailing that he had nothing to do with it and praying to God to be forgiven for what he had done. That poor driver had obviously not done his safety check before he left and just decided to pull out of his space. While she was attached, she got ripped apart, literally right in half. Without getting more graphic than that, I can tell you that a normal human body should never look like that. And it was like something that you'd probably see in the Saw movies. I remember stumbling back and bumping into another driver. He just looked at me, pale, and looked as if he was going to get sick. I don't do well with that body function, so I moved quickly away from him and started making my way back to the truck. I was almost running back, not even thinking about if I should have waited for my ex because he had the keys. I made it to the truck and tugged on the door, but it wouldn't open. So I ran to the truck stop full speed. I was going to get sick, and I'd rather people not see me. I passed the spot where the bobtail truck was parked, and it was gone. My ex made it to the truck stop looking for me, and he said he would walk me back to the truck so I could get some sleep. Yeah, right, like I could sleep after seeing that. He turned on the radio and began to talk to the other drivers. No one had seen anything. There had been, not much traffic, and it was just kind of a quiet night there. The police had been working overtime cleaning up the truck stops after they had caught wind of the first few murders, so it makes sense that it was a quieter night. I sat in the bunk and just kind of stared out of the windshield at the flashing lights. There was a tapping on the door. A police officer said he was getting statements from everyone in the truck stop, giving us the rundown about safety in numbers and to not go anywhere alone. I wasn't planning on leaving the truck. I told him about the creepy guy that smiled at me in the bobtail truck and the description of the truck. The officer didn't see the point of me telling him about a creepy guy, but he took down the information anyway. We're going to pause right there. Are you kidding me? This drives me insane. And you hear it so much if you listen to any kind of true crime or watch any documentaries or whatever, that there will be, and not all, there are so many great police officers and law enforcement officers. But there are also a lot of them that will just brush off certain details. And, if they don't deem it important, then they don't give it their full attention and what is due and what is owed to that particular thing. And I think that is so, so messed up. And as we will go along, you will see that moment should not have gone down like that. This officer should have looked into it. Sorry, that was a rant. And now I'm going to take a deep breath because this story is very, very heavy, but it's very good, very well written. All right. I don't think I slept for days after that. I just kept seeing that image. Flashes kept going through my head. The vivid image of her face. She had a red rag in her mouth and the 100-mile-per-hour tape around her wrist tying her to the headache rack. She'd obviously struggled because there were bruises that were formed on her stomach and her face, and mascara was running down her cheeks. And the smell, rotted meat and blood. It makes my stomach queasy just thinking about it. It didn't seem to faze my ex as he went on, it wasn't anything big or special. After a few weeks, I finally managed to get the image out of my head, or I'd finally convinced myself that it wasn't real and it was just a scene from a horror movie. Either way, I was glad for the time being of having it out of my head. Fast forward, and it was February, about 3 months after the incident, and we were heading to New Orleans. I was super excited to see the area and hopefully get in to see Mardi Gras. I wanted to visit the cemeteries and see the mausoleums and go into the voodoo shops and everything. We had a few extra hours to spend there, so I was happy when my ex said we could go wandering around. We parked at this little truck stop. It was one that didn't show up on the big Rand McNally maps. We were told about it by another driver. It really wasn't more than a hole-in-the-wall mom-and-pop shop with a small dirt lot and a flickering light pole on one end. But it was within walking distance of the French Quarter, which is where I wanted to go. "Hey there, Purple Pete. What brings you out this way?" The voice on the CB was loud, so he was really close. There was only 2 other trucks in the lot. An old Freightliner hauling a Swift trailer, and a dark green Kenworth that had a cattle car on the back hauling cows. My ex was still a bit miffed about being stood up months ago. He could really hold a grudge when he wanted to. "Maniac, hey man, where the heck have you been? Why'd you stand us up there, good buddy?" my ex radioed back. "Oh man, you know how it is. Cops make me a bit uneasy, and I'd rather not get caught," he said with a chuckle. "Caught? What do you mean caught?" my ex questioned. "Don't worry about it. You just keep an eye on your girl. I'd really hate for something bad to happen to her, like all those other girls," he trailed off. We watched the CB key up again, burying the needle on the radio. The signal was so high that it had to have been in the same truck stop. Silence. He was keyed up, but was just kind of breathing into the mic. "You know, with all the bad things I've been doing in these truck stops, I like to play with the lizards before I torture them and destroy them. Those nasty things. They shouldn't be defiling themselves with the drugs and sex like they do." It sounded like he was talking through gritted teeth. Silence. His voice was even louder this time. We could hear the rumble of a truck heading down the one-way street that ended in the truck stop. "Only God and the devil himself can judge me for my sins. I will continue to rid this world of the diseased ones that plagued humanity." We looked at each other. This was the only time I'd ever seen anything like fear in my ex's eyes. Tears began to well up, and for the first time, I was scared. Like, truly scared. A dust cloud came rolling up into the truck stop, and this dark, black, menacing Peterbilt, with a cattle guard and brow, came rolling by slowly. The driver keyed up just as he went past the nose of our truck. It was the same creepy guy from the truck stop months ago. He smiled that disgusting smile at us and put the mic to his lips. "Be safe out there, Ninja Dwarf and Northern Exposure." His CB handle was pinstriped on his driver door. It said, "Maniac," in bright red letters. In April of 2004, we headed back to Alaska because my ex's father had a massive heart attack. We stayed there for a while before heading back out on the road. As far as I know, there were 7 total murders. There could have been more. Who knows how long he'd actually been, quote, riddling the world of its sins. I don't know if the guy was ever caught. I can tell you one thing, though. The second time around, I wasn't making friends with anyone on the road, and I always kept a 6-inch blade on me at all times, just in case I ever ran into the maniac. Oh, you guys. This story is so good, so well written. Like, I felt like I was living her story, and it's just so scary. I'm going to get into the comments. Someone commented and said, "Man, that's one heck of a story. I'm going to have a hard time falling asleep tonight. I'm glad you're safe." And the OP said, "It's one of the few truly terrifying things that happened to me from another human." And then the commenter said, "Maniac was definitely playing some cat and mouse games with you guys. I think he wanted to see what he was capable of. I hope he's either dead or rotting in prison somewhere." OP said, "Years later, they did a docuseries on Netflix, a special about unsolved murders, and they were talking about all the murders of the prostitutes down the I-10. I reached out to the guy and never heard anything back. I could still describe him to this day." I hate that, again, for the second time around, she is trying to reach out to someone and, like, describe this man and tell people about him. And this time they just don't respond to her. Like, ugh. So if you want to go searching, I'm so curious. There are a lot of truck stop things and trucker murders and things like that because it's so easy to go from one side of the country to the other. And, you know, that's a lot of jurisdiction mess and everything else. So I feel like this is unfortunately much more common than one would hope. But I'm really interested to see if anything ever came from the Netflix series or just in general about this guy. And maybe one of our listeners can hunt down the answers and let me know if he's been caught by now. But like I said, that one's a very heavy one and a very, very creepy one. Probably one of my favorite stories that I've read so far, and one that has just really stuck with me. And like I said, this is the second time that I've read through this one, and I still feel the dread and the anxiety just like I did the first time around. So, such a great story. And unfortunately, so sad for all those victims. The next story is by the user Cat Lat Adipdat. And the subreddit is True Scary Stories. This one is called I'm Not Gonna Hurt You. Okay, great. I totally addressed that. All right. Remembering these words still sends a chill up my spine. This was a few years ago. My 33 and husband, 43, and I were getting gas late one night. This was a bit of a weird gas station where two roads intersected at an angle, with the gas station being on the acute angle, if you can picture that. At the pump we chose, there were no working lights, and it was difficult to see directly from either road. We were driving a soft-top Jeep Wrangler with all of the rear windows taken off. My husband got out to pump, and I was sitting in the passenger seat looking at my phone. That's when I heard it. I'm not gonna hurt ya, a wavery voice said some distance behind me. I froze, suddenly terrified. I turned around to look out at the empty space where our back window used to be and saw what appeared to be a homeless man a little ways off. He had a slightly wild gray hair, a washed-out beanie, and an oversized jacket with lots of pockets that hid his hands. I suddenly realized how dark it was and how hard it was for anyone else to see us. And I couldn't see his hands. I had a distinct feeling from deep down, so prominent that I could almost hear it. Run. But we're just pumping gas, and he's just a weird homeless dude. My husband and I were from Key West, and we'd seen plenty before, and they were almost all harmless. So I slowly turned back around and went back to my phone. Yet I still heard him, the distinct sound of shuffling feet, the rustle of his jacket. I'm not going to hurt you, he said again. I just need some help. Do you have any money? I'm not going to hurt you. At this point, I could tell he was almost at the Jeep. We'd only been there a couple of minutes and we'd been almost on empty. There was no way the tank was full. Without warning, my husband rushed into the car and hurried to start the engine. I could tell his hands were shaking. He managed to throw the car into drive and we peeled out of there. I looked behind us and saw the man standing there, not reacting, next to the dangling nozzle my husband hadn't bothered to pick up. As we turned out of the gas station, my husband said, I just had the most horrible feeling. Something in me just told me to run. I looked at him in horror and told him that I'd felt the exact same thing. I felt tears come to my eyes as I thanked him for listening to his instincts. We went home feeling quite shaken, just going over the events we had just seen and the fear that we had felt. It was a day or two later that we watched a YouTube video by security analyst Scott Stewart on the Kenyan Mall shooting. And he said that in every event like this, there are people who said, right before it happened, I had a terrible feeling that something bad was about to happen. He adds that some people listen to that feeling and leave the area, while others mention how much they regret not listening to it. I burst into tears hearing this, knowing the feeling he had described all too well. I had had that feeling and was one of those that ignored it. I remember crying, thank you, at my husband for listening to his sense of danger. Now, it is fully possible that it was just a harmless person asking for money in a slightly creepy way, and that nothing bad would have happened, but I can't stop remembering how the weird angle kept anyone from seeing us. I can't stop thinking about how dark it was. And I can't stop thinking about his hidden hands. And I still get full body chills as soon as I remember him saying, "I'm not going to hurt you." Moral of the story, I guess, is if you ever get that feeling that something bad is imminent, just leave the area. It may be a false alarm. And if it happens a lot, you may have hyperactive anxiety and may want to try Lexapro. But it's better than going through the rest of your life wishing you had listened to that feeling. See, and again, like that's the kind of stuff that I'm not sure if I would listen to it or not. Like maybe eventually I would come around to it. I would definitely clock that this guy is creeping me out. And I would tell my husband, but I feel like my husband probably would be like, "It's fine. We're fine. He's fine." So maybe I would be the one that listens, but my husband wouldn't listen. I don't know. Maybe. Either way, so glad that they were safe. And I kept expecting this story to end with like, and then the next day we saw on the news that 5 people were murdered in this same parking lot or something, you know? So glad it did not end up like that. And hopefully it was just a guy just kind of being a little too creepy. All right. That's where we're ending it tonight. Thank you for spending another night with me. Drive safe. Check your back seat. And if you're home, maybe lock your doors. If you are craving even more stories, head over to our Patreon where you can get bonus episodes. And if you have a story that you'd like to share with the world, please, please, please send it in. You can email us at statichourpodcast@gmail.com or join the Discord and submit it there. I am so thankful for all of you guys that are here listening with us, watching us on YouTube. And if you want to catch the next broadcast, make sure that you are following or subscribed wherever you listen. I'm Bree, and you have been listening to The Static Hour. We are going off the air. Good night.